Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's very important webinar on the topic of financing a sustainable food system. Today, of course, is December 6th, a day after World Soil Day, and just following the International Day of Banks, which took place on the 4th of December. So we're bringing together, those international days commemorating the role of finance and, of course, sustainability. Today, we're joined by a luminary panel of speakers where we're going to discuss the existing fiscal challenges of the food system at present. And we'll also address the different means of financing new forms of food production and distribution so that we can build a more sustainable and resilient global food system. We're going to hear from a variety of different actors in the food system who will be sharing perspectives and views from their respective companies. And we're going to, have a couple of open discussions around some of the key questions that we address. My name is Christine Gould. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought for Food. I also had the pleasure and honor to serve on the advisory committee for the UN Food Systems Summit that took place this year. Food systems are, at the core of every single one of our sustainable development goals. And this topic of how we're going to finance the transition is, I think, one of the most, if not the most important topic, at hand. So I am going to now turn it over to our first speaker, who is Molly Brennan, who's actually also part of the UN Food Systems Summit. So great to have you here, Molly. Molly has held a range of roles working within the UN system and private consulting focused on climate change and sustainability, with a particular emphasis on food systems. In her current position, she is supporting Action Track 4 of the UN Food Systems Summit that aims to advance equitable livelihoods for food systems workers. In previous roles, she has advised corporates, investors, foundations, and small businesses on navigating climate and sustainability policy. She's supported climates to integrate sustainability into their core business strategy and has developed policy and advocacy campaigns on ESG issues. So over to you, Molly. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks for such a great introduction. And thank you to the Intelligent Digest team for inviting me to speak today. I'm also super excited to hear from the other panelists. But yes, as Christine said, I'm Molly and I'm the operational lead for Action Track 4 of the Food Systems Summit. So I'm going to start things off by discussing the UN Food Systems Summit programme, which will hopefully give you kind of an overview before moving into the more specific finance focus. So if we can just go to the second slide. So first of all, why food and why now? So food is more than just what we grow. It touches every aspect of life, our health, environment, economies, and cultures. And when food systems fail, it presents a huge risk to not only access to food, but also education, health, economy, human rights, peace, and security as well. So when they function well, they also present a really huge opportunity. So in 2015, world leaders came together and developed a plan for the future, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, from which now we have the 17 SDGs. And if we go on as we are, particularly in relation to food and energy, it's going to be hard to meet those 2030 goals. And so right now we need to focus on the big issues like food. And this is part of what the UN Food Systems Summit aimed to do. And so there's three main points I want to discuss just as an overview. So first was raising awareness. So the summit aimed to raise awareness and elevate public discussion about food systems transformation. And ensure that all stakeholders involved across the food system are aware of the issues and also very comfortable with dealing with food as a systems issue. And for example, kind of looking at, beyond the agricultural ministries, who it affects all, right across the government. So it's like making sure that we're understanding that it's a systems issue. Second is on commitments. So developing principles to guide governments and other stakeholders to drive food systems transformation, and also to generate these commitments and partnerships to move forward food systems transformation. And the third is on accountability. So creating a system of follow-up and review to ensure that after the summit, there's accountability, and we continue sharing experiences and lessons and knowledge. So if we switch to the next slide, I'll just touch on the process briefly. So over the course of 18 months, the UN Food System Summit engaged hundreds and thousands of people from around the world. And on the slide here, you'll just see a brief bit on the people who were involved in the overall governance. So looking at, the leadership, the support structures and constituency groups. So you can see in the middle there's action tracks, and I was a part of action track 4, but there was 5 other action tracks which were led by different INGOs on various different issues, from ensuring access to food, shifting to sustainable consumption, nature positive production, building resilience, and also the one I was working on, which was equitable livelihoods. And so the action tracks really tried to engage different groups of stakeholders globally to frame the summit. And that was really in order that it lived up to the idea of being a people's summit. And this was really part of the key goal of the UN Food System Summit, that it was for people, it was made by people and for people. And I think also important to mention here is that as part of the support structure, there was levers of change. And one of those levers of change was on finance. And this finance group was led by the World Bank. And it focused on repurposing finance, reducing finance to where it's destroying and degrading food systems, and also scaling public and private finance towards food systems. Now, if you just switch to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more on the process again. So here I've just tried to show you kind of how it all sort of panned out over 18 months and hundreds of people involved. So basically, between December 2020 and May 2021, there was hundreds of consultations which were held. And through these consultations, more than 2,000 submissions were collected. Now, together, these propositions created a menu of action that basically would help support governments as they shape their national pathways towards food systems transformation. As you can see there, in July, we held the pre-summit. That was in Rome, and around 100 member states came, and that was the first kind of indication of where we'd got to. There was a number of coalitions of multilateral action which were announced, but it was really just a marker of showing where we were. And then between the pre-summit and the summit, the coalition themes continued to be shaped and developed, and we continued to define national pathways. And then we hosted the summit as part of the UN General Assembly in September, unfortunately all remote, but fantastic that it still went ahead. And now if we go to the next slide, I'll walk you through a few of the achievements that the summit made. Okay, so there's 5 achievements I want to highlight. The first is around the Secretary General's statement of action. So there was 5 key areas of which they encouraged people to drive global action around. Now, these were informed by the action tracks, the leaders of change, and also the scientific group, which were part of the leadership team. So these areas were nourishing all people, boosting nature positive solutions, advancing equitable livelihoods, decent work, and empowered communities, building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks and stresses, and also supporting means of implementation. Second one I want to discuss is around member state engagement. So this is a fantastic achievement that over 165 member states made statements at the summit in September. So 165 member states made statements at the summit, and 103 submitted national pathways for food system transformation by the time. It's a really exciting kind of show of political advocacy around the need for food systems transformation. Third was around global commitments. So by the time of the summit, we saw 218 global commitments posted on the summit's online registry on a range of different topics. And I'll talk a little bit about priorities in the next slide. The fourth one was around multi-stakeholder coalitions and initiatives. So at the summit, there was 5 headline coalitions which were announced. All had various different buy-in from member states, academics, NGOs, private companies, really exciting groups which were driving transformation in different areas. Just to give you an idea of the sort of topics, some of them were on universal school meals, healthy diets, agroecology, and many, many more. And I think there was 5 that were announced as headline, but there's many more. And I'd encourage you to go onto the website and you can see the full list of coalitions which are being developed. Now, finally, the last one is financial commitments. Now, there's many more that could be covered, but I think the most notable was a $10 billion commitment from the USA for food transformation, which is a really exciting kind of indication of support. Now, if we switch to the next slide, just talk a bit about what's next. Oh, sorry. No, this slide is just talking about member states' priorities. So you can see from here, it's just a breakdown of what member states talked about at the summit. And interesting to see here, and obviously it should be this important, but COVID was a really key aspect that people were talking about alongside food security, nutrition, and many more. So if we can just switch to the next slide. So what's next? So since the summit, there's been various different bits of international advocacy that have continued. So we've had the Committee on Food Security, Nutrition for Growth. All have been really important events to sort of continue global advocacy on these issues. However, I think despite the progress we saw with the Food Systems Summit, I found food systems were largely absent from COP26 this year. There was huge progress, I think, in bringing agriculture involved, but I think food systems in their entirety have not yet to be kind of fully integrated into the COP26 agenda. So this year at COP, we did see that coal and fossil fuels were mentioned explicitly for the first time in 26 years. And this is great, but we really need to see quicker progress on food than we have had with fossil fuels. I'm sure you've all heard this statistic numerous times. We know the food system accounts for 35% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And without, it's going to be impossible for us to reach global targets if that's not included in the conversation. But I'm not without hope. I think moving forward, we know we've got COP27 coming up in Egypt next year, and they've already indicated they're going to have a food day and bring food onto the agenda. COP28 will be in the UAE, in Dubai, and I know they've also intend to have a really strong food element to the programme. So I think as we move forward, it's just really important that we continue to bring food into the global debates and make sure that we continue the progress of the Food Systems Summit. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Molly. I was getting so reminiscent of the work, working on the UN Food Systems Summit. And the pre-summit in Rome was just a really great moment in time to come together, meet the action tracks, see a lot of these commitments taking shape and then be announced, of course, at the actual summit in New York. And I think the other thing that really stands out to me is how the UN Food Systems Summit was not ever designed or shouldn't ever be perceived as a one-off. It was really, again, like you said, to be this movement of the people for the people and to integrate into all of the existing initiatives that are touched on by food, which is basically everything: climate, environment, and of course the work that the UN agencies are doing around hunger and malnutrition. So that was really great. Thank you for bringing us up to speed there. And of course, also that lever of change that the World Bank was leading around finance is so important. So really looking forward to see the things that come out of that. And now it's my delight to introduce our next speaker with a very similar name, Christiane Buani from World Food Program. I'm Christine, so Christiana and Christine here. Great to have you here. Christiane joined Surfan as head of the Operations Management Unit on the 1st of May, 2019. She has a PhD in international law at the University of CEUB in Brasilia and a master's degree in law of international relations at the University Paris 2. She has been working for the World Food Program as a policy program officer for more than 9 years in the Zero Hunger Initiative's school feeding, food and nutrition security, South-South, and capacity strengthening. She has helped to set up the Brazil Regional Center of Excellence Against Hunger and Malnutrition, which is known as Surfan. I hope I am pronouncing that correctly, but over to you, Cristiane.
Thank you very much, Christine, and thank you again for Intel Digest for this invitation, and very happy to hear Molly, and congratulations on your presentation. I think it was a very nice introductions to the webinar that we have today. And now I will bring a bit the discussions to Africa, because that's where the Regional Center of Excellence is, and because also Africa is the epicenter of the discussions on food systems, and it's also where financing for these actions is crucial, and that we need also to be looking at this. I think I will share a presentation. So probably I can share, let me do it from, you just let me know if you can see.
Yes, we can see. It's great.
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you very much for this invitation. And what we wanted to bring to you today is a bit of what is happening and the questions in Africa on this regard. No, as I was telling you, a lot of the discussion and what Molly was presenting was also looking at continents where food insecurity and malnutrition have still very high rates, and how we could work together to solve this issue, and at least to be able to bring some more hope for the achievement of the SDGs in the continent. It was all in this regard that Surfan and WFP with governments have been working centers of excellence that is looking at these long-term goals, especially to increase the country's capacity to deal with their development challenges. And the Regional Center of Excellence, it's called Surfan, as Christine was saying. It's a partnership, a strategic partnership between the government of Côte d'Ivoire and the World Food Programme. It's based also on the successful initiatives with Brazil and China, but this center is specific to focus on Africa issues. And really, it was launched in 2019, and the center seeks to promote knowledge exchange, partnerships, research, but also most of all working under the framework of South-South cooperation and capacity strengthening to help countries to progress towards the SDG. And then this is, so looking at Surfan, the mission of the center is to support countries to accelerate progress towards the end hunger and malnutrition in Africa. And looking at the SDGs and look how we could bring the expertise, the information to support this type of activities. And the vision of Surfan is to be a catalytic and a hub of good practice, innovative solutions to hunger and malnutrition, and also to be working to promote and facilitate the access and exchange of knowledge on good practice, helping countries to transform good practice and lessons learned into opportunities for advancing the fight against hunger and malnutrition. We heard a lot that for new financing to food systems, to sustainable food systems, creativity is crucial. It's also the whole that you can bring more innovative solutions, looking at local solutions to how you can improve what is available for countries to move forward in this agenda. So Surfan works more in 4 topics that is also related to the food system, as you say, in the homegrown school feeding, rural transformation and agri-food, value chain development, community resilience, and also nutrition sensitive, that is mostly nutrition, integrated nutrition with food fortification, and also food quality and safety. Just recently, Surfan convened a meeting on a continental meeting in food fortification. That was exactly to see what will be the recommendations if countries want to move forward in this agenda and support the objectives that are to increase the food systems, sustainable food systems, and the ways of doing this in the continent. So if we wanted to summarize, what we are doing is promoting good practice, and that's looking at all that we have from the initiatives that can bring more value to the food system, and how countries can learn from this, how they can. We have a lot of good practice in the continent, but sometimes these good practices are not well documented and not well informed. And the leaders and here the policymakers, they are looking for this, because normally when you talk about food system, and Molly presented, it can be a lot of initiatives. So governments asking themselves, from where we start, what are the process, how can we bring this to our continent? So these initiatives, when they are documented, if these good practices are better systematized, they can learn from that, and it's easier to influence the implementation of their national policies and programs. And of course, joint with this is all the efforts to strengthen country capacity, because governments and their leaderships are crucial if you want to transform food systems and take this challenge forward and improve how these goals are seen within their countries, in the continent, and also with their communities. So if we look now with all these international meetings that we had around the financing sustainable food systems, I think some of the scenarios that we have seen, the World Bank report, but also in IFPRI and others discussions, is that we need a bit more of clarity, visibility, and also communications on the target of allocation for financing. That's what we have seen when we see initiatives, when we look in Africa, is that financing is a cost-cutting issue when you look at the development goals. And it's important to understand which goal we are aiming at and which level. And this is specific for Africa. The countries, they have so many competing priorities and not always the available resources for that. So they need to prioritize, they need to optimize resources. And looking specific of what targets we are going to be achieving, what we are going to be serving, this is very crucial when you're looking at financial food systems. The other thing also that we have been noticing the continent is that identify of sources for financing and which levels are they represented. Sometimes these opportunities are not clear, and I think webinars like this one are crucial if we want to understand who are those involved, where governments could go, which are the requirements if you'd like to look for innovative sources of financing for this type of activities, and what are the objectives and resources. So another thing is also an understanding of the context, right, for finances, like understanding the context, the objectives, and the problems to solve. This may seem simple, but when you look in a diverse continent and complex as Africa, sometimes these can be a challenge. And also it's crucial to identify which stakeholders can be engaged and how you prioritize what is needed for the financing of food systems. And what we see also, especially for the continent, there is a need to bring together the public and private stakeholders, scale up the private stakeholders engagement in Africa, understanding how these partnerships can be consolidated and strengthening is crucial if you are looking to new ways of financing these activities in the continent. And the other one, as I mentioned, is to look how to improve the documentation of innovative solutions, good practice, and lesson learned at all levels, at the UNA level, at government level, private sector, so people can learn from this, and also to understand how they could bring that for their context, because this is also where you look at local solutions. That's where you can see where probably some additional funds could be found to address some of the challenges of sustainable food systems. And in this case, Surfan mostly focus on harnessing the power of the knowledge and the capacity strengthening, especially, as I mentioned, building partnerships. Make sure that we can expand the collaboration and cooperation beyond the geographical borders, bringing the partners together to Africa, discussing exchange, as we did with fortification, but we have already done with post-harvest laws. We have already done also on homegrown school feeding. So these are the thematics that we would like these partners and stakeholders to understand how they can contribute for the sustainable food systems in Africa. The other thing, as I mentioned, is to mobilize the skills and expertise to support the replication and scale up of good practice. For example, some of the expertise, if you bring the expertise, for example, from Côte d'Ivoire and Benin to support the value chain of cassava development in Congo. It was a very crucial intervention to improve food system in Congo and also contributed to sustainability, as they were able to diversify the products, they were able to access markets. So this is the type of things that has been solutions in Africa that have been very well seen for the future of food systems. And also promoting the applied research, really disseminate the information so that program and policies by governments could also respond to these innovative solutions. So more specifically, as I was saying, in knowledge generation and dissemination of good practice, Surfan has been investing in documenting good process, especially process that can ensure the delivery of affordable and healthy food. Another one is really capturing the knowledge focused on food security and nutrition, mapping what is there in Africa in terms of initiatives, and really specific entry points that can contribute to sustainable food system, but also entry points that can support to have multiple benefits that are also interested of government efforts. Also promoting innovative technology, as we had, for example, Harvest Laws, the dry card, and also consolidating of a database of experts and good practice that are available for this type of government and practitioners trying to improve and consolidate sustainable food systems. In terms of country capacity strengthening, it saw a lot of trainings, workshops, also tools that can help and empower the government and vulnerable groups to advance their work in sustainable food systems, really, so they can be better prepared for the challenge in this area. And also, of course, collaborating with all stakeholders so that they can bring their expertise, and it's a work for everyone. That is, if we're looking, and I think Molly also mentioned that, and South-South collaboration, it's a key issue also, because it's where you are able to strengthening the local, national, and regional capacity, where you motivate and inspire countries to see if we had some look of fiscal space and there's an innovative solution on a government that finds some additional resources on analyzing fiscal space, how the others can also do this, and what is, because it's not only about to find the resources, but it's also how you allocate and how you are going to distribute and how you're going to follow up the use of this resource so it can be cost effective and can also deliver the outcomes that are expected. No, I think the message from the food system was also very, very strong on this sense. And I think encouraging the dialogue and exchange among Africa and global stakeholders are crucial so that this facilitation and promotion of good practice can really reach the government, and you have this global advocacy on this topic. So I just, I hope I don't go too long. And I just wanted to bring these topics a look for Africa so that you see that understanding what does it mean sustainable food systems and the finance behind it is crucial for this continent, is also a challenge. But I think the food system started the discussion, and now it's also how you apply this to really change and transform implementation of SDGs in the continent. And Surfan is there to support the governments and partners to really move this forward and transform this agenda. Thank you very much, Christina, and I can digest.
Thank you so much, Christiane. And we do have some questions coming in, which we will definitely get to during the discussion. But for now, I'm actually going to introduce our next speaker, Mark Hunter. Mark, are you there?
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Mark. Mark is the strategic lead for food and facility support at the East Ayrshire Council, a chef by trade. He has always been in the public sector in some form from the age of 17 in the Royal Navy colleges, and then recently joining East Ayrshire Council just over 5 years ago. He's married with 3 children, all of which are grown up, despite his young looks. Mark is passionate about food, food education, supporting local communities, and enjoying the occasional game of golf. So Mark, over to you. Really excited to have your perspective on the topic.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me along. Today I'm standing in for a colleague from Assist, Jane Jones. And really I'm going to come from his perspective of the Scottish approach, national, and then go into a little bit of what we do locally in terms of sustainability and food and local suppliers. So Scotland has a long and proud history of providing balanced and nutritional food and drink in schools and delivering food education as an integral part of the national curriculum, and recognising that provision and education are equally important in supporting our children and young people as they grow into adulthood. Evie, I don't know, can you share my slides from your side at all? Christina? Can you share my slides at all? Can you share slide 1?
I don't have your slides. I think someone from the Intelli Digest team can do so.
I was hoping you would have shared your slide, Mark.
Sorry,
Let's get that sorted.
I'm using my phone, sorry.
If you want to send me the link, I can share them. No problem.
Sorry, I'll carry on and we can show the first slide in a wee minute too. But through our school meal service, we aim to provide our children and young people with an appropriate amount of energy and nutrients to support their growth and development, at the same time supporting those most in need through our meals programmes. Embedding food education is very important to us within our national curriculum, helps to ensure that our children and young people are provided with the skills, knowledge and experience they will need to take responsibility for their own health and well-being in the future. And we find that is very important. And I'll come on to some of those other points in a minute or two. But food choices are influenced by a range of factors, including habit, affordability, availability and sustainability. So really nationally, the introduction, Scottish Government introduced universal free school meals. It started around about in 2015 with primary 1s to primary 3 having free school meals. And recently they've announced that universal free school meals will be available for all primary school children from August this year, starting with primary 4. It's a phased approach. It goes into P5s or primary 5 in January, and then primary 6s and 7s in August 2022. That also coincides with the introduction of the early childhood centres or particular nursery schools, if you want to call them that, and then including meals, snack and the milk scheme, which was introduced in August as well. It went live for all those schools. What does that mean for school meals? There's a lot going on, a lot of things that have to be looked into, sourcing food, menus, obviously different levels of nutritional standards in there, and then the importance of the food education programme. We feel that as the young ones come up through from early years right through primary school, they'll start to recognise and understand the different foods and the different tastes, and we do see in primary 1 coming through from the early years that had that lunch experience all the way through their earlier childhood years. Within Scotland, there's 32 local authorities. We provide in approximately 350,000 meals a day. And we have a lot of collaboration between ourselves, local authorities, and my counterparts and colleagues, and also the links that Jane Jones has made through Assist with Scottish Government. And we speak in many forums about and give our views about where we want to be with the side of school food meals. And then obviously the recognition for using local suppliers. I'll go into a bit of what we do locally with East Ayrshire, but a lot of our local authorities are working with local suppliers. And it seems to be getting more and more important or more focused going forward. So our care and services within East Ayrshire, we've used local suppliers since 2004. Obviously we had to go through the procurement process as like any normal procurement process, but we looked at that and how it would benefit our school meals and obviously our community. We have been the longest serving gold member of the Food for Life Soil Association in the UK. We've held that since 2008. And 72% of our food spend is with our local suppliers. We are a mixture of rural and urban areas. We have approximately 16,000 pupils attending East Ayrshire schools and around about 3,000 early years childhoods places within our schools. We have 36 primary schools and 7 secondary schools, which some of those are campuses, so they have a mixture of early years, primary school and high school, all of which use the same suppliers to provide the school meals. The majority of our kitchens are production kitchens, so we are quite lucky that we've kept that knowledge and skill from our own staff. And I do feel that's important when we do start to support the whole food education programme, which we do engage in quite a bit with it through our education colleagues. And we also support the community food. We have a dignified food programme, which really started out based on Brexit and the possible issues we may have had during the lead up to Brexit. But we never seen that. And then obviously we went into the pandemic. But with the community larder support, that is us about supporting the community to provide additional food support. And I'll come on to a question later that Michael had raised about trying to reduce some food waste. And I'll say something about what we did on that later on. So the drivers for change were really about supporting local suppliers. It was about engaging with the community. Our food education programs within schools in the community, and then the fresh local produce. But supporting the local suppliers, we looked at economy and skills, and also the economic growth that brings to our local economy. The fresh local produce, we knew what we were getting. We could speak to our suppliers on a regular basis or easier at the drop of a phone. And also during the pandemic, having the local suppliers to support us paid dividends to what we were doing initially. We freshly cooked food in schools, and we got over, based on the Food for Life gold standard, we have over 75% of our food is cooked fresh each day. And again, that goes to all our schools. It's ECCs, primary and secondary schools. It's the same level as we do in all. It's building that sustainable model. If we engage with our suppliers, we start off on a small scale, and then we support them, we grow them. We guarantee an income at the end of the day as a local authority. And it also is that supplier engagement. We use our suppliers as a community benefit, and they provide either the ingredients or the knowledge in some of our food education programs, or like myself, we would go in and do the cooking demo based on the products that our suppliers provide to us. Again, that food education for young people and our young ones pays dividend because they see exactly where the food's coming from. They get to cook along, and then they get to taste it. And 9 out of 10 times we see them going back and doing this within the household. And also upskilling our staff and training. If we're still cooking and we're still providing the fresh cooking, we're still updating those skills and again, the knowledges within our own staff. We do invest in our staff and there's nutritional courses, and I'm pretty sure nearly all local authorities will invest in their staff. And it is important to do that, to move with the times and also with the produce that you're working with. Recently, and I know you can't see this slide just now, but most recently, before the pandemic, we had a visit. Oh, there we go. If you can just flick to Hilal Elver's visit picture with the kids. I think it's about the 5th slide, 4th or 5th slide, please. That one, yep, back one. Just back one, please. No, can you go to that's it. Yeah, so recently we had a good visit from Hilal Elver. She was the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food, and that was really looking at what we were doing, sustainability through the Soil Association, but also the local produce that we were providing on the school meals, and again, our food education programs. It was really good for the staff to see somebody of that profile coming along and seeing what we were doing, and also for the young ones to meet somebody else that's interested in about food. Next slide, please. Food education has always been at the heart of what we're doing, and it is important to engage, especially about trying to reduce waste. Food education programs are aimed at, or what we do here, they're aimed at two different levels, one at school and school age people, but also families and parents. We find by engaging with parents, there's more likelihood to maybe try things at home. There's a more likelihood, and part of those programs is about showing them what to do with additional food or making something that can be used for a different source. And an example of that is the tomato soup that we do. We then turn that into a pasta or a bolognese using that same base sauce. So people recognise that if you make something once, it could be used, if you've any left, it can be used for something else. So part of those programs that we do in sustainability and reducing food waste is very much part of what we actually want to do. Next slide, please. So practically what we did at the beginning, and you can see some of the things here, we started off in 2004 with a short, small pilot. We tailor the menus and recipe development to get the optimum result. And we ensure staff and stakeholders understand and support. We promote East Ayrshire food, culture and community plan, and we develop the food education and public information sessions. The producers and suppliers tender in a suitable geographical and produce lots. So we did produce 5 lots within the geographical area. We were lucky in East Ayrshire. We have quite a few suppliers on our doorstep. I know some other local authorities may not be in the same situation. But public sector contracts offer suppliers secure payment and predictable demand. We know that. And by having that contract, yes, it may last and be extended over the years, but obviously they know what they're guaranteed and what they're getting. And again, during the pandemic, some of our suppliers benefited for us being able to use them to provide food for our vulnerable young ones and families throughout the pandemic. This can in turn increase employability opportunities. A lot of our suppliers have increased their workforce. They have renewed their vehicles and they have turned their vehicles into electric. They provide solar power and they're looking for biomass within their establishments. So reducing those food miles down, first of all, but also sustainable sources and how we deliver. One example of that is we use Corey Main's eggs, and what happens there is we have 2 locations where they would drop off, and then while we're delivering our own food to the schools, we take the eggs out, and that's one of the ways that we can reduce the school miles around the local authority, because it is quite a strange shape of local authority, for want of a better word. And then how to encourage the SMEs to invest. We really want them to invest in going for these local suppliers or these local authority contracts. Some of them are afraid, but it's having those coaching conversations, allowing PIN notices to be put out beforehand to allow them to say, okay, I want to go for that, and allow them to ask the questions about what they maybe be concerned about. And that's how we move forward. Next slide, please. But within the community, we value that public food offers access to good food and nutrition. We know what's going in our school meals, and we value the quality of that food. It supports opportunities for learning about food. Again, we go back to the food education programs, and the reputation and public confidence in our local authority service. They are providing fresh, quality cooked meals. Again, we go back to, we know exactly where it's coming from. The results: reduce the food miles, making use of supplier community benefits, which is very important. The investment in local business, the circular economy, right, and the value of the food that we put on the plate. So yes, it does come with a cost, but we manage that cost, and we have managed that cost since 2004, and we built that into our sustainability and things going forward. And I think that is me. Yep, that's me. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'm happy to ask them.
Thank you so much. That was a very compelling, presentation with a lot of practical insights. I have a million questions and I see some are coming in, but what I really appreciate is the systemic nature that you're approaching this with, and also the acknowledgement of some of the challenges that, for example, SMEs and local community players can have when navigating complicated procurement processes. So there's lots to dive into there. Thank you so much for elucidating us on this important work that you're doing to improve school feeding. And now I'd like to introduce Andrew Lloyd from Intelli Digest Growth Solutions. Based in Scotland, Andrew Lloyd is the Chief Operating Officer at Agritech Innovator Intelligent Growth Solutions, who is convening today's session, where he is responsible for the go-to-market strategy and market-facing functions. His passion is to ensure customer delight and to forge durable relationships with all stakeholders. An electrical and electronic engineer by background, he has 35 years of experience in the global IT industry and executive sales and marketing leadership roles with industry-leading brands such as Oracle, Kai Integrity, Workforce, Workplace, Carrero, and Allocate. Over to you, Andrew Lloyd.
Christine, thank you very much. Hopefully you're hearing me loud and clear, and I'd like to thank Molly and Christiane and Mark for setting up this topic so well. As you've noted, Christine, IGS is a vertical farm technology business. Quite simply, we design, manufacture, install, and support our customers, principally farmers, to plants. Almost all of them are growing food, and they're doing that across 4 continents now. Most recently, very local to me, here in Glasgow, obviously we had COP26, that's been mentioned a few times already. We pitched our tent just a few hundred meters away from the hydro where most of the politicians were buried in the blue zone. Within our tent, we erected one of our vertical farms. We had over 3,000 visitors come to that. And actually online, we had over 90 million people interact with that. So quite remarkable. And picking up really on the themes that Mark Hunter just touched on, the real focus for us was engaging young people. We had over 1,000 young people come in various classes from their schools, because we fundamentally believe that this is about changing habits, and if we are going to change the way in which we feed ourselves so that it is more sustainable, so that we can both protect the planet and cope with what the UN predicts is still going to be 10 billion people by the time we get to 2050, then we need to change many habits. The habits of what we eat, the habits of how we grow food, and the habits of how we move food around the world, or rather how we stop moving food around the world, or at least to the degree that we are tackling it. Food strategy, Molly on her slide, I think at national level identified that national food security was probably number 3 of the priorities behind COVID-19. And I think that's completely understandable as to why. I think Christiane also highlighted the need for government, both at national level and at local level, to really break out of their silos, I think was her phrase, in that this isn't just about food. It's about well-being, it's about health, it's about conserving fresh water supplies. And I was heartened to hear what Mark had to report around things like the procurement policy that East Ayrshire has managed to put in place. If we are going to grow fresh local produce, then it probably should come within just a few minutes of where in fact that food is getting distributed to, whether that's the supermarket shelf, or whether that's the school kitchen, or whether it's the refrigerator in my home. So people have hypothesized around this 20-minute radius. I think most people are a long way from delivering on that ideal today, but it certainly should be a direction of travel. And specifically, we're going to need to tackle and in fact positively disincentivize the CO2 intensive supply chains that make it acceptable for the blueberries on my breakfast muesli this morning to have been flown halfway across the world just for my indulgence. Mark also touched on what I think he called a community food larder. So with vertical farms, we have the concept of a vertical allotment, simply having year-round fresh produce powered by green electricity, so that a community, whether that is schools, hospitals, care homes, can actually decide what they're going to grow, and to be able to grow things year round that possibly won't grow in the soil or in polytunnels or glass houses outside. We do believe that government needs to intervene in this. It's all very well to have a national food security policy, but it's no longer acceptable to be passive. That isn't just money. I know we today are talking about financing a sustainable future of food, but there are other things government can do too to help. So planning policies, how are they going to incentivize or even make it simpler for bringing certain new types of agriculture, including vertical farming, into their local communities. Most people have never seen a vertical farm, let alone approved a planning application for one. So we need that in the planning policies. Depending where you are in the world, there is an awful lot of derelict or brownfield land that is essentially going to waste. If local councils continue to view this as land that we may one day put housing on, then I think that is incredibly short-sighted. If we can intervene in the global food supply chains and relocalize food, then we're going to have to make some of this land available. Central governments are going to need to look at taxation, in particular on things like renewable electricity supplies. It is quite frankly ludicrous that government continues to subsidize diesel for farmers and not subsidizing the electricity that could be used in order to relocalize food. And that obviously in addition to whatever level of financial grant, debt financing, or even tax reform that central government could do. This isn't just going to be down to the public sector though. Private sector is definitely at play here. Fundamentally, if you're looking at a private business, in particular one growing food, then one of the questions we most often get asked is, does it make any business sense? Can this business ever make a profit? Quite frankly, I think some of the first entrants in this space have essentially tried to do two things. They've tried to become farmers and they've tried to become technologists. And history shows that that's very common when a market is being formed, but it's pulling off two miracles at once is probably one miracle too many. Many of these new startup type businesses lack any trading history, therefore are very difficult to do any level of credit risk on, which means when finance is sought, almost always it comes at significant expense. I also think that we really need to take a serious look at what financial metrics are we really applying, and is there a way in which we can bring sustainability metrics and financial metrics into the evaluation criteria. Today, when I look at the investments that the private sector is making, almost always there is a productivity metric of currency unit per unit of mass or per piece of product. So pound sterling per kilograms, or euros per kilograms, or US dollars per pound weight. And of course, when comparing growing far more locally, potentially indoors, with growing in the bare earth, that is one of the measures. Obviously there are quality measures like nutrition or shelf life, but we really need to start looking at CO2 equivalent per kilo just as much as what did it cost in order to get this to the farm gate. So I know we're running a little bit behind on time, so I will bring it to a close there, but suffice it to say, there is work to be done at national and local government level. There's also work to be done in terms of the private sector finance and how we're evaluating those initiatives.
Thank you so much. And such important points that you made on looking at kind of new return on impact metrics. And really, I'm a huge fan of everything happening in the urban farming space. There have been some recent questions around, economic viability with, the Arrow Farms SPAC being called back. But I think that this sector needs to take off, and these financing questions need to be addressed. And your thought leadership here is, very, very compelling and important on, how to make this work for better food systems during this point of transition. And now it's an absolute pleasure and delight for me to introduce the woman behind this entire event, Dr. Evie Canoe, who holds a PhD in environmental engineering with a research interest in the use of artificial intelligence to optimize anaerobic processes. Dr. Canoe loves nature, and she is passionate about engineering solutions to address environmental and societal challenges. She is leading Intelli Digest on a mission to empower global food sustainability, eliminate food waste, and zero hunger. Dr. Canoe is an Enterprise Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering and the Royal Society of Edinburgh. She is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and an Associate Fellow of the UK Higher Education. She's a champion of the STFC Food Network. She sits on the board of First Port and is a member of the Scottish Government Commission on Purpose-Led Business. Over to you, Evie. Oh, we have you on mute. Apologies.
Okay, thank you so much, Christine, for that amazing introduction, and also thanks to everyone who's spoken before me, Mark, Molly, and also the amazing moderation by Christine. It's really a pleasure to be able to talk to you today about, what we really need to finance a sustainable food system. At Intelli Digest, we aiming to ensure that everyone should be able to have access to the right food, the right nutrition, and we're doing that through different approaches, both technology innovation and capacity building. But today, what I want to focus on is on the agrifood techpreneur project, which we're very much excited to be launching today, and I'm so happy about what the impact of this particular program could deliver on a global scale. And if we go into the discussion today around sustainability, why is food sustainability a critical issue that we need to address in our society today? Now, a recent report, which is in connection with World Bank and UN food system, has shown that today's food system generates $12 trillion in hidden socio-economic and environmental costs. Now, when we look at the scale at which this is having an impact, we know that 1 in 5 deaths is linked to malnutrition. Over 1.9 billion people are currently overweight or obese, and over 900 million people are hungry. But in the midst of all of this, we know that over 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted globally. It just shows a food system that is not well balanced, a food system whereby we're trying to produce more and we're wasting so much, and people are not having access to the right nutrition. And there's a lot of gap in terms of people understanding the purpose of food and what food is meant to do for them. So I think there's a lot of gap that we need to close within the food system. And this is what we are, very keen to deliver at Intelli Digest. So by working with stakeholders, and which is one of the key things we love to do, we're trying to address these challenges. We're trying to ensure that everyone could have access to the right nutrition, to the right food, and people don't have to go to bed hungry. I tell you that just through capacity building and also through technology innovations, we are able to deliver this. A lot of the technologies we've developed is currently, more details on that can be found on our website. I'm just going to touch on them. We've got the iDigest, the i7, iTracker. These are solutions that enable stakeholders in the food system to really look into what they can do in the process to be more sustainable. We've also been able to run a number of programs, capacity building programs, where we're helping people understand what they need to do, what a sustainable food system actually, how do you actually achieve sustainability in the food system? How do you go about that? How do you understand the gap in what you're doing, and how can you improve on that? So what we've understood and what we've seen is that there is still that knowledge gap. There is still a bit of misunderstanding or lack of understanding of what that next step should be. If I'm talking about net zero, if I'm talking about sustainability, what does that simply mean when I bring it down to my business? How can we then help these stakeholders in the food system, whether it's farmers or food producers or food manufacturers or food retailers, or food distributors, hospitality sector, office canteens? How do they know what that next step, what that thing they need to do to improve on the sustainability, to be able to achieve net zero? And really important for us in Intelli Digest is understanding the fact that net zero is not a single factor that needs to be addressed separately, because it's all connected to the sustainability challenge that we have in our society. It has to do with the whole sustainability pillars of purpose, of people, of peace partnerships, and also talking about planet and then profitability. How do you bring these key pillars together to help people understand what they need to do and that next step they need to take to achieving sustainability, and how is capacity building and technology innovation going to help stakeholders in the food system be able to achieve that? This is really core to what we do at Intelli Digest, helping people identify that gap. And more importantly, helping people to measure. So what the Global Food Loss and Waste Tracker, the iTracker does, is it helps you to set up a baseline to then work towards improving on what you're doing. So being able to measure, understand what you're trying to do, set a baseline and work towards mitigating whatever is the gap you have in your system is really important. And being able to create that tool to help businesses to be able to do that is something that we find really great. And we've seen a lot of interest in across the different people we engage with in the food system, but also we help to prevent food waste from occurring through the iSaver, and we also help to ensure that, you know, when we have inedible food waste, whether it's in agri-food production or in the hospitality sector where you have other form of processing waste, we can actually take that and create nutrient from there that can be put back into the food system using iDigest. So very interesting technology. You know, I'm happy to follow up with anyone who's interested in that, or you can get more information from our website on that. But I think for me today, what is really exciting is the launch of this agri-food techpreneur project. So what we've identified is that there is still the need to help produce food locally. Now, the current report from World Bank and also in collaboration with UN Food Summit, one of the key things that's come out of there is what we call the food finance architecture, which contains 5 core imperatives needed to optimize public spending and mobilize private capital for a global food system transformation. So this is something that, you know, has been talked about a lot. How do you mobilize funding to facilitate and enhance sustainable food system? And one of the key things we feel at Intelli Digest we can contribute to building our network of collaborators as well as research organizations which we work with is to establish this agri-food techpreneur project. Now, the agri-food techpreneur project, we involve Intelli Digest working with universities and also working with financial institutions, and that's why having this particular event at the back of the UN International Day for Banks and also the World Soil Day was really crucial for us, because it really brings together these 2 key areas and be able to bring people within the sectors to understand what can be done to move things forward. So for us, through the Agri-Food Techpreneur project, we're going to be working with universities to, you know, help young people to engage with the food system. It's really important to know that the International Youth Day for this year was focused on enabling the youth to engage with the food system, which is really important because young people need to understand how we can make this food system more sustainable, how we can work with the food system. And it's really nice to see through the UN Food System Summit that a lot of young people were really engaged to ensure that we can have good food for all, which is something that's really important, not just having food, but having good food for all. So through this agri-food techpreneur project, we are going to work with universities. We're going to identify these young people who are interested in agri-food system. We're going to provide them business and development skill and enable them to establish a business plan that is geared towards the food system. And what we want to do also is work with the banks to facilitate a trial of whatever the plan is. Within 1 year, they can then have a very good product which they can sell through the Global Food Loss and Waste Tracker platform for free. And then through this engagement with investors and also the bank, they can scale up that solution and be able to make an impact within their local community. So this is a local focus but a global move that could help change the food system and change the way we can innovate around the food system by giving power to the young people, by helping them understand what they can do and how they can go about doing that to support the food system. That is really core to what we want to take forward through the resources that we have at Intelli Digest, through the networks we've built over the years, through our research engagement with different universities. We feel that we can really make an impact in this area. We can give back to the communities where we're working through the Agri-Food Techpreneur project. I'm really excited about the feedback we've got from different organizations we've engaged with, both the universities, both the financial institutions, they are keen to see projects like this grow and thrive. And I'm hoping that at the back of this event today, we can collaborate more with different organizations who will be interested in working with us to deliver this. Now, the Global Food and Waste Tracker has been launched, and we've seen a global adoption for it across different regions, from the Americas to Africa to Asia, and also within Europe. There has been adoption for it, and there's been interest in the use of it. And we want to see this being a tool that more organizations could benefit from, and more importantly, that we can have youth innovators in agri-food sector driving the change and ensuring they'll have a sustainable food system. And we want to work with different stakeholders to be able to do that. Whether it's certifying institutions or financial institutions or tech solutions that can help these young people take off and really deliver change and impact in the food system. That is core to what we're trying to do. And I'm hoping that there'll be more collaborations coming out from this conversation. I'm happy to take any question that anyone has got. But yeah, it's a great day, and we're looking forward to the future and what sustainable systems that we can evolve. It's really important that we're able to speed that action to 2030. We need to be able to sustainably feed more people, and we've got these statistics coming up often in this conversation that we need to feed over 10 billion people by 2050. If we can evolve a more sustainable food system, we've got the resources to be able to do that, and we can do that in the most efficient way. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions that come up from this.
I'm obsessed. This is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your new program. And I really see that this is going to drive really tangible impact on this important topic. So thank you so much. I was wondering if I could get a steer from the Intelli Digest team about how long you want to have for the Q&A, given that we are over time. But we have a lot of questions. Do you want to stick with the 20 minutes for the Q&A, or how do you want to handle it?
I'm sure we can crack on, and then we've got the time allocated to the Q&A. We can't go over 5 minutes beyond that, so let's just see how.
Okay, I'll ask a few of the questions that have come in. We have some. I'm actually going to start with Molly, if that's okay, since she was our first speaker. A question just really specific to the Food System Summit commitments. Just a clarifying question. From the commitments that have been made so far, what is the representation of sub-Saharan countries? And is the $10 billion a global pot? How do African states and institutions access the $10 billion that have been committed?
Thanks, Christine, and thanks for the question. On the commitments made by sub-Saharan African countries, I'm not actually too sure, but I can, in the chat, I can share with people watching, and you can have a look through, and I will too, just to check exactly where they came from. In terms of the US commitment, I know that 5 billion is domestic, 5 billion is international. I imagine they're still sort of fleshing out how that will be distributed, and I would expect more information to be coming on that in the new year.
Amazing. And so I think the person who asked that question could reach out to you too to find out more information and updates when that information.
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to get in touch. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. I think the next question is for you, Christiane, but anyone else can jump in. Is there any institution that's coordinating fund assessment for Africans in achieving the needed partnerships for the South-South cooperation?
Yes, thank you very much for these questions. I think collaboration coordination is still a challenge throughout the continent, especially because it's a very diverse continent and many institutions working together. We don't have a specific facility for funding. We have, for example, institutional organizations like African Development Bank, who is normally concentrate a lot of the financing for the type of product, the services for SDGs. So they have a very large portfolio, so they are helping coordinate. I think it's more also on the finance. They are one of the biggest stakeholders working in the continent for this area. Mostly for South-South cooperation, Surfan has been playing a lot of this role in terms of exchanging and discussions around the SDG2 and what is happening around convening the partners and the stakeholders to discuss on that. I think there are many also institutions that work on the finance, especially UN agencies for the continent. But I think it's still a large room for more coordination and collaboration on this sense. Specific, as I was saying, and probably Molly mentioned this before, is to look, for example, when you find the financing, is how do you distribute, how do you prioritize, and how much, you know, do you look at where are the good practice, which governments would be more engaged than others, and what would be the expected outcomes in each of the countries when they receive the finance. Because sometimes from my experience in the continent that we always used to say that normally for good initiatives, you can find the finance to support it, but then what comes after, no? And I think as Molly was saying, and Evie and all the colleagues and the speakers, it's more than only financing. It's financing to really reach the outcome and to have the progress on the SDG and implementation. And I think that's where our challenge is, to see how do you coordinate so that these countries and this government, the continent, can progress in these areas. So I think it's still room for that. I think Evie, that's also very experienced in Africa, probably can comment more on that, or colleagues, if you know a bit more of any other institutions that I mentioned. I hope it contributed.
Such an amazing point. And I also really love the reflection that you made about, it's not just about allocating money. It's also making sure that, the money is used in the most efficient way. It's also really important to, for funding agencies of all kinds of sorts, to recognize too that it's, this capacity building is really imperative. And there, and it's not just dictating how the money needs to be spent, but also learning from the person receiving the money, but also understanding that small organizations are encumbered by small teams, lack of legal departments. Just applying for procurement, as Mark talked about, is hard for small organizations who don't have, the capacity and bandwidth to do a lot of paperwork. So there's so much complexity around financing besides just where to give money. That's almost the easy part. It's really how to make the money work. So over to you, Mark. Actually, a really interesting question came in about food waste and distribution, because proper distribution systems can prevent food wastage and can help reach the needy. How can we address this issue about actually improving our distribution systems to reach communities?
Yeah, thanks for that. What we did in 2017, we started looking at the potential impact of Brexit and how it would affect some of our communities. Obviously, with the pandemic coming, we sort of brought that whole sort of setup forward. And we engaged with some of the local larders that we did have within the community. And we said, right, okay, how can we support these a little bit better? Within that, the cabinet and our council made a decision that we would pay the membership for Fair Share and help distribute that food. We found that some of our local people were going in their own cars up to Fair Share in Glasgow. So we said, well, collectively, we'll pay the membership. We'll support, and our goal was 10 larders. We now have 16 on board, and then each week we go and we pick up the food from Fair Share, and then we distribute that. We also support with funds that was available. We also support those larders to set up, so that allows us to distribute surplus food from Fair Share, but also surplus food from the local supermarkets, etc. Part of that is about that coordination of how we support the local community, and it is about food mainly, but it's also making those connections and having that coaching conversations with people to say, are you okay? Do you need any other further support? And it can be as simple as, have you claimed your fiscal meal allowance? Have you filled in these forms? Can we help you out? Do you need any other support? So that's helped obviously reduce surplus food. And one of the answers that Michael Rada was asking, we've distributed now from FareShare around about 108 tonnes in the last 2 years from FareShare. Now, that's not including the food that they've picked up from their own local supermarkets, but that's what we had distributed, which would probably normally go to surplus food or food waste, somewhere along the lines from big supermarket chains. Within that, though, what we did in schools, we introduced, and that was sort of slowed down by the pandemic. The food that we produce in schools is fresh. So we looked at a way of, if we've got meals left, what can we do with it? So in a dignified way, what we did was we packaged up the meals that were left, we chilled them down, we labelled them, but we left them in a dignified place for young ones to take home at the end of the day, because we did know that some of our kids within the community may go without a meal at night, or they just want to give to somebody else, whether it's their grandparents or somebody else. We didn't note down how much of that was there, but what we did find was there was no food left at the end of the actual day. So we did see it making a difference.
That's amazing. I love also the dignified approach that you're taking. And also just wanted to mention that this distribution aspect, Intelli Digest and other groups are bringing the kind of power of data, to make sure that food waste is either prevented or that distribution and logistics can be solved even at that local level. So really powerful, the convergence of like technologies and, business models that can make the issue of food waste and logistics and distribution one that we can solve. Now, Andrew Lloyd, over to you. And the question we have here is around the cost of vertical farms. It's extremely expensive. So Michael is asking, why is the vertical farm price set up so high? When will vertical farms remind that we need a mix of foods that can be grown? Most of the farms aim to only have 1 or 2 plants. And that's a common, criticism of vertical farming, that it's just leaves and herbs, very expensive crops. So is this something that we're going to see costs go down and more crops being introduced? What's your perspective here?
All right, probably several questions in one there. Firstly, we agree. If vertical farms are used to grow relatively low nutrition leafy greens, then I think we've failed communities across the earth and may not have put the kilowatt hours that we flow into them to best use. So, we believe that there will be a range of crops grown. At IGS, we support over 150 different types of crops. Yes, of course, from leafy greens, but rooting crops, fruiting crops, microtubers, tubers, seeds, even tree seedlings. So, it depends where you are in the world, and we are not a colonial company telling people what to eat. We very much, our view is that communities should be enabled to grow the crops they want to eat and that are tuned for the local palate and nutrition needs. So that's an important part of it. In terms of the finances, I guess 2 things there. One is our farmers, even in Western Europe, where the price of electricity is high, typically will get a payback within 3 to 5 years, which compares very favorably to most other agricultural investments they could make. Thirdly, I think the other thing that we will see very swiftly within the indoor agriculture market and vertical farming specifically is that we'll move away from having to make a significant capital investment to these farms being provided effectively on a rental or subscription, if you like, as a service. So farms as a service is coming. There is a lot of capital locked up in pension funds around the world that's going to be put to work for those farms that can actually deliver an annuity revenue, and implicit within there is an annuity profit, which gets me back to one of the points I made during my presentation. The business actually needs to make sense, which full circle means you need to grow crops that the community needs, that they're prepared to pay for, and that deliver upon the nutritional needs within that community.
Fantastic. And with that, I'm going to close out session 1. I believe that we have a small break now. So if anyone wants to chime in one final word, or we can give everyone a short break. Oh, Evie, over to you, please.
I think Molly wants to say something too.
Yeah, sorry, please.
Molly, do you want to go for it? Then I'll come in.
I'm sure. Well, yeah, thanks for having me today. It's been really interesting to hear from all of you, and just look forward to continuing the conversation and just making sure that we're moving forward, making progress on more sustainable, equitable food systems.
Right, thank you so much everyone for joining in today, and thanks for all the comments that's come through and the questions. And for me, all I can say, building on what Andrew just said about communities, growing food for communities that they really need. We have launched a Plan to Save campaign as far back as World Food Day on 16th October. And what we're saying to communities, you can tell us what you want, and we will make sure that we'll get a farmer who can grow that food for you, or we can put in a farm to make sure you get that food that you need. So the infrastructure is there. Communities have got the power to make a decision on what they really want as a society. And it comes down to whether we want to continue with the existing supply chain where we have a lot of food waste and a lot of people are going hungry, or we want to grow food that meets the demand of people so we can balance demand and supply, and also evolve innovative ways we can use the resources to be able to enjoy the food we eat in the most meaningful way. And that's one of the key things we're doing with the Plan to Save campaign. So if you go to our website, please, be part of the Plan to Save campaign. It's all about not just saving you money, but saving the environment, saving people from dying and hunger, saving people from malnutrition. This is both a public health issue and environmental issue, and we need to tackle it holistically in that way. So I think there's a lot we can do as a society. The power is in our hands to make that decision to evolve a sustainable food system. We can't always put it back to the government anymore. We've got our own responsibility and our own way we can contribute, and it's for us to make that decision to make sure that we can be part of this change and really support a sustainable food system. Thank you so much for this first session. I'm looking forward to the second session. Yeah.
Me too. Thank you so much. 10-minute break or 5 minutes?
10 minutes break.
10-minute break. Okay. See everyone soon.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. I think it's been good because it's we've always separated food waste in the past, but we've never really been able to monitor how much we're wasting. We just chop things, cook things, and put it in the bin and then forget about it. And I think being able to weigh it puts into perspective how much you're actually getting rid of and not using, when you probably could use a little bit more if you needed to. I relate a lot to the smart meters you get for your utilities and energy, where you could actually see what you're using. It's the same thing where you suddenly realise that you're probably wasting more than you should, because you go, oh, that's a kilogram of whatever. You go, well, that's kilograms a lot. So I think it's been good putting it into perspective about how much we do get rid of.
Well, I think it's like taking the COVID injection. I was asked to whether it was a television company, and they asked if they could film me getting my injection. And I agreed, and my doctors agreed. And I was asked why I wanted my injection. Now, what I said was that, like everything in life, it may not be of immediate importance to me, but I wouldn't want to infect somebody else. And I think it's the same with food waste, that it might not be important to me to put it out, but it could be important to somebody else who could buy, a fertilizer and it's cheaper. It also could be important to somebody else, where one of the chemicals derived from the food waste, which is useful for health, then it might be benefiting somebody else. So I believe that in life it's not always what benefits you that you should do. It's really what benefits others. And I think the management of food waste is an important example of this.
Hi, I'm Jo Chidley, the co-founder of Beauty Kitchen. Beauty Kitchen makes the most natural, effective and sustainable beauty products in the world. We use cradle-to-cradle principles and we're a B Corp certified business. My journey as a chemist has always been about how to get as much as you can from resources. And that's been throughout my personal life, but bringing that into my business as well. So the journey with food waste in particular has been long and very big for me. Monitoring my food waste feels great because what gets measured gets done. And we were really surprised by how much food waste we had, not just at home, where we're a family of 4 with pets, but actually at work as well, where we're 16 employees.
Quite straightforward here. What we do is we measure all of our waste. We've got underneath here, we've got scales, and we separate out all of our waste. So today what we've been doing is we've been chopping our veg and taking the cuts that are important, and the rest of it goes straight into waste. It's so important for the environment to make sure that is. So we're doing all the things, all the proper things, we're doing them all right, and they all go into proper recomposting, etc., rather than going in straight to waste and straight to landfill. What we need to understand is how much waste that we're actually producing, and that should be a consistent level. So once we know, and we're measuring that by the use of the scales, so we know how much waste is going to the proper way, so therefore we can then measure the business on how sustainable that the business actually is.
Hi, Ife.
Hi, Ilan. Thank you so much for
Can
joining.
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Making sure that
Please go for it. We already started the second session, so I'm very much pleased to have you here with us, Julian. Please do introduce yourself and then quick overview about sustainable financing, and then we can roll it on. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you so much, Ife, and the Intelli Digest team for bringing us all together here today. And thank you as well to our prior speakers. For those who are just joining us, good afternoon to you all, and welcome back if you're coming back after this break. I'm Shaila Malat-Bates. I'm an ex-banker turned sustainable finance and fintech entrepreneur, strategist, and advisor. I also chair a collaborative and action-oriented international community called the Green FinTech Forum, which I'm hoping will be effective in helping to further impactful initiatives worldwide. We've had an enriching first session earlier that really touched on aspects from both a global and local perspective. Thank you, Christine, for your incredible moderation throughout that. And we have 4 more esteemed speakers who will each present their insights on this incredibly integral topic of our food sustainability for all. Once they're all done, we'll open up to you, our fabulous and hopefully curious-minded audience, for our Q&A session. You did amazingly in the first half, so please do keep your questions coming in the chat for us. I hope that Fiona is ready. So without further delay, it's an honor for me to introduce to you the first of our second set of speakers for the remaining couple of hours. Fiona Gottsman is SME Strategy Specialist at the EIT, which is one of Europe's largest food sustainability through innovation initiatives. More than that, she is a passionate advocate for innovation and entrepreneurship in Scotland. Fiona is CEO of the Scottish Institute for Enterprise, the national organisation for promoting and supporting enterprise and entrepreneurship in Scotland's universities. Prior to her role there, Fiona founded a life sciences marketing consultancy, Kelados, utilizing her 18 years of sales, marketing, and business development experience in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries. Fiona has held other senior global positions also in both small and large organizations, including Q1 Biotech, BioReliance, and Invitrogen. Fiona, I will hand over to you.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work okay because I have a presentation to do. So, yep, I think we're good, yeah. So, so thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I'm here really just to talk about my current organisation, EIT Food. I'm going to just give you an overview of EIT Food, what it is, what it does, some examples of the organisations and companies that we've been supporting, how we can provide some funding for innovative research, which I'm sure is of great interest, and how people can actually get involved with us. So you'll have to bear with me because I've pulled together slides from other people, and I hope that it will make sense and it will flow together. I believe it does. And I'm open to, obviously, I'll stay on for the panel later and happy to answer any questions as well. So I shall get started. So what is EIT Food? Well, we're actually part of EIT, which is the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. It's considered to be Europe's one-stop shop for innovation, and it drives innovation across Europe by supporting entrepreneurs, innovators, and students across Europe. So we don't just work with businesses, we work with public sector, and we work with the research institutions and private sector as well. So it's the typical triple helix that's involved in innovation and driving change. EIT has a number of different communities, so you can see those hopefully on the screen here. EIT Food is obviously the one that I'm going to talk about today, but there are others that are relevant, such as EIT Climate, EIT Food, which I'm talking about, EIT Digital, and EIT Health. So things are very much interrelated, and on occasion these different segments do actually work together as well. So we don't work in isolation, which I think for innovation is really important. So just to drill down into EIT Food and what we are Europe's leading food initiative. working to make the food system more sustainable, healthy and trusted. And I think, you know, having listened to some of the talks earlier and knowing the speakers yet to come, I think we all agree that we will all have very similar missions. The mission that tied to Sustainable Development Goals as well is to create a world where everybody can access and enjoy sustainable, safe and healthy food, and with trusted fairness from farm to fork. So EIT Food looks across the whole food chain, literally from food, and in the UK in particular, UK and Norway, obviously aquaculture is a big segment as well. So so basically from food creation to food consumption and transport and everything in between, that's where we are. We are one of our key strengths is that we are a network of partners, which I'll come on to later on, but those represent at the moment over 85 of Europe's leading agri-food companies, as well as research institutes and universities. And the network also includes smaller innovative businesses as well, such as our Rising Food Stars Association, which I will come back to. We are co-funded by the European Union, so funding comes from Horizon Europe, or the bulk of the funding comes from Horizon Europe. Our headquarters are in Belgium, but we also have regional offices. So I work for EIT Food Northwest, and that particular office covers the UK, the island of Ireland and Iceland. So everything that's marked in dark green here, but you can see that you can see the other regions here as well. So what's our focus? We have 6 strategic objectives, and any projects that we're involved in, any companies that we're working with, it's very important that they are working towards working together to achieve these strategic objectives. And obviously, given everything that's been talked about here, the enhancing sustainability is one of the absolute key elements of our strategy, as well as catalyzing food entrepreneurship and innovation. So a range of different things, listening to Evie earlier as well, obviously the digital network is increasingly important as well. It's not just about food production, but it's the resources that can actually help to improve the food system overall that we are interested in. And we have a range of impact goals. Again, I will, in my next slide, I'll just explain, we'll demonstrate some of the impacts that we have had. But again, just to emphasize that EIT Food is about bringing people together. It's to help to create a total food innovation ecosystem. And that includes everybody that's involved in food production, food manufacturing, food consumption as well. And so you can see from this circle, it includes businesses, consumers, policymakers, entrepreneurs, farmers, fisheries, research institutes, universities. So, and I think that's really one of the absolute strengths of the network, is bringing all of these together. So what is our impact? Impact in numbers, really. And I think some of the really important things are around the investment into food innovation. So we have invested nearly 3 million into business creation programs, which I'll talk about shortly. We've supported 350 companies in our business creation services. We've also provided over 10 million euros in direct financial support for innovative projects. And in the past year, we've actually co-created and launched 23 new products and services by our membership organizations, our innovation platforms. So that's just a little snapshot of some of our impact. Our key focus areas are, these are the areas, and again, I think they'll be very very similar to many of the other organizations that are talking today, circular food systems. We need to get away from this current linear model that we have. Sustainability in both agriculture and aquaculture, especially things like food production, have got a significant impact on the global environment. So, as I've said before, it's also very much linked to climate as well. In terms of health, targeted nutrition is an area that is particularly important, and we're seeking innovation. Alternative proteins. We have a fast-growing global population. We need to find more sustainable ways of getting high-quality, safe and healthy proteins to everybody. And new technologies such as the digital transformation as well are increasingly important in making us more efficient and better at what we do. So these are the six main focus areas. When we're looking for partners, when we're looking for collaborators, these are the focus areas that we are looking to support. I mentioned that we have a number of core partners. So this is just a representation mix of the ones that are involved in our Northwest Europe community. And you can see some major universities here, research institutes in Scotland. The SAMS, the Marine Science Association, is one of our partners. As well as network partners such as Waitrose and a range of rising food stars, which are SMEs. We have 4 main pillars of activity. I'm not going to go into all of these today, but I will just mention the kind of fostering innovation and supporting entrepreneurship. But equally important are the kind of public engagement as a networked European organization. To educate and to engage with the public are very important as well. And these are things that we can do across our whole partner network, which can actually help to support the SMEs, the innovative SMEs that are joining in and are really pushing the boundaries of innovation in this space as well. It's our size and our partnerships that allow us to leverage and help them to communicate their message to the wider public as well. I need to just go back, sorry. I wanted to talk briefly about entrepreneurship because business creation is a really important element of what we do and a really important way in which people can engage with the IT food to receive funding as well. So we have 3 different entrepreneurship programs. The first one is Seedbed, where we are looking for innovative ideas across the whole process of food production. But again, just going back to our targeted areas of sustainable agriculture, aquaculture, targeted nutrition, alternative proteins, etc. So we're looking for possibly academic spin-outs, possibly people that are coming with their own ideas, business ideas, that are truly innovative. The first Seedbed program is very much about customer validation. So you may have a brilliant idea, but do people agree with you? It's very competitive to enter this program. It is run across I think 6 different locations across Europe. One of them is at Queen's University in Belfast, runs one of them. They run for about 6 months. There is a short workshop program, but the bulk of the time is actually spent encouraging the participants to get out, used to say out of the building, but away from their computer really, and actually engage with potential customers to really validate their idea and really test out their business models. So it's an absolutely vital first stepping stone. The second stage, and people don't need to do one and then follow on with the other, they can enter at second stage, but the second stage is a food accelerator network. And that is for early stage businesses, small businesses who have already done an element of validation. They may already have launched their products, but they are looking to scale it, are they still looking to do further development of their first products or prototypes. That's a year-long programme. There is a small amount of funding provided again to do more prototype development, etc. So seedbed, you may typically get 5,000 or 6,000 euros. The fan network, they'll maybe get a little bit more, 10,000, 15,000 euros. But it is very much about using the power of the EIT networks. The funding, anyone that participates in these things say that the funding is not the most important element, although it's very, very helpful. The most important network element is actually being able to tap into the EIT network. So mentors that are provided for them who can open doors, and the mentors usually have many years of experience across the whole food network, so people can be partnered with a relevant mentor who can help to open doors and help to provide advice on their business models and their validation of their products, and help them to on how to develop the product. So the access to the networks to find potential partners and find potential customers is very, very important part of that. And the final one is the rising food stars, who are still small to medium businesses who are looking to scale and grow and actually but continue to innovate. And those businesses get support from being part of the network, but they are also able to participate in some of our innovation programs, which I will just come on to now. I'm weary of time because I didn't keep track of when I started, so I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to run through very quickly, and I will just flip through these very quickly. We have regular innovation calls, which are large funding calls, which are looking for partners, research institutes, larger companies and smaller companies. I've got 4 examples here, but I will assume that you can read yourselves, and I will just go through them quickly. You will be able to get these slides afterwards. But we're looking at things like bringing cod waste, using cod waste, turning it into food. We're looking at use of seaweed supplementation to mitigate methane emissions by cattle. Again, you can see along the bottom, there's a combination of small companies, larger organizations, and university research institutes. Here, Mattis is an Icelandic organization that actually provides support, business support for innovative companies. Developing fava bean as a sustainable source of high quality protein. Fava beans traditionally grown for animal feed, but it is a high quality sustainable source of protein. So we're looking at how that can be managed more beneficially and introduce that more into the human food chain as well. Net zero carbon livestock farming as well. So this is really about developing a tool that allows farmers to mitigate their environmental food footprint. Okay, this is probably one of the most important slides, so bear with me for a minute. As I've said, one of the things that we do is we have quite substantial amounts of funding for innovative proposals. And what these are about are actually for funding consortia of organisations. So there's very much an emphasis on collaborative activities which bring in innovative technology solutions to market across the whole sector. And what we're looking for are research institutes and SMEs. We're looking for companies, organizations have products that are at least technology readiness level 7 at the time of submission, because we're looking for them to actually market their products by the end of the project cycle. So we're looking for these very innovative technology solutions. And we have an open call at the moment, and all the details are on the EIT website. And so if this is something that is of interest to you, I would say that it's not for very small early stage startups, but certainly those that are still looking to scale and grow, looking to continue to develop their innovative technologies. This is a really good opportunity. And the EIT Food Network can actually help to find suitable partners for these collaborative opportunities as well. A lot of the detail on our website is very complex, but if it's of interest, you access significant amounts of funding. Each project typically gets up to €1 million of funding. So we're talking about a substantial amount of funding, but more importantly, help and assistance within research institutes and other potentially larger businesses in the network to help you to commercialize your product.
Fiona, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to, because you're going over
I am
time.
sorry, I should have timed myself, but this is effectively the last
But thank
slide.
you, but I love the multi-pronged approach. EIT is not new to me. There is a lot there. So please, if you want to know more, go onto the EIT website, because there's a lot of stuff from a multi-pronged approach, which is really, really important, from education and funding and so on. We will come on to funding questions, because as a financier, those bits are the important ones.
Absolutely. And
but
my apologies for over talking. That's me finished.
Cool. No, it's fascinating and it's brilliant. Get in touch with Fiona. I am going to move things along now. I'm sorry that I had to cut you off, but I'm going to now move on to Aminata Sow. I hope I'm pronouncing your name very correctly, who is Chief Agro-Industry Officer of the Agriculture and Agro-Industry Department at the African Development Bank. Prior to her mandate there, Aminata held several managerial positions in Senegal, where she was Director of the Regional Development Agency and Regional Coordinator of the National Local Development Programme and Rural Infrastructure Development in Senegal. She graduated as a civil rural engineer in 1995 from the Environment and Water Institute and ex-Interstate School of Rural Equipment Engineers in Burkina Faso. I, who could have gone into engineering, personally find that very, very impressive. Aminata, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much again. Good afternoon to each and everyone. Let me first try to see if I can share my screen.
We have a little bit of time because there was a slight typo in the guide that I picked up on. So we will have a little bit of time, but try and keep it within the 10 minutes will be brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, so first of all, I wanted to thank Evie and all the team from Intelli for convening us to this very important topic. To just run through this presentation, I'll quickly come and remind you to those who maybe don't know very well African Development Bank, the strategic and operational priority areas, and putting a lot of focus maybe on Feed Africa strategy, which is one of the priority areas. I'll also try to just focus on some of the key trends to highlight maybe the relevance of the Feed Africa strategy. Also to discuss a little bit about the value chain development approach, which is a privileged approach of the African Development Feed Africa strategy. And the topic, which is sustainable financing, also will be one of the slides we want to discuss with everyone. So African Development Bank has been established in 1964. African Development Bank is a primary Pan-African development institution with 81 members. The African countries are the regional member countries. So in African Development Bank, we have 54 countries from Africa. So you can see that the capital of this African institution is open to non-regional member countries across the continent. So the bank's development agenda is delivering financial and technical support for transformative interventions that will significantly reduce poverty through inclusive and sustainable development. So this is highlighted in the 10-year strategy of African Development Bank. And now we have 5 priority areas, as you can see: light up and empower Africa, feed Africa, industrialize Africa, integrate Africa, improve quality of life of Africans. So now coming to the trends before the feed Africa. Just to remind, I will not focus really and take time because everything has been discussed, and the documents like the one we discussed this morning with the UN Food Summit already highlighted in details the trends, but just focus on Africa. What we can record is a very high increase in the food production. Because we know that in Africa, the growth in the population is very rapid, and also the middle class in Africa is increasing more because the urban population is also increasing. We can also put another point on the fact that the sector in Africa is more than 60% of the GDP of the African countries. And so if barriers, agricultural development were to be removed, bringing more land and cultivation and rising farmers' productivity, Africa's annual agricultural output would increase from $280 billion to more than $880 billion by 2030. So this will, of course, increase or improve quality of life for both social, economic standpoint. So another point very important is that agribusiness and the role of private sector is shaping the value chain, and this should be boosted in Africa. It was not the case because agriculture was mainly subsistence oriented, but now we are recording more and more interest from private sector, and this is very important. Another element, because we have some challenges, I think the health, the nutrition dimension, we have discussed this morning and this afternoon. I think in Africa, this is really a very key issue because 9 to 1 billion cases of illness are recorded each year by World Health Organization due to foodborne disease. So this is really a very key issue in Africa, and 99% of Africans under 5 years suffer from stunting and underweight because of many, many issues, but I will not really go into details on this. Another point is the vulnerabilities to crisis. Crisis due to climate change, but also many issues like displacement of population, which can completely create a lot of maybe problem in terms of the loss we can see in the assets, and so this is really another key problem. You can't talk about the food systems without highlighting this very key issue in terms of rural development, which is really the basis of our food systems. The COVID-19 was also, which brought very big concerns in terms of disruptions in the supply chain. And I think that this is some just key maybe features I wanted to highlight. Another one very important is related to the food waste. And most of the case in Africa, we are concerned about the food loss rather than the food waste, because if you have to waste, you have to have enough food, or having enough food is a key problem. So in Africa, the problem, the mainly is food loss. And so for the sector to realize its full potential, the African Development Bank estimates an additional financing of between 24 to 30 billion unit of account, or sorry for having not translated into dollars maybe or euros, but just what unit of account is around 800 euros. So this is really what is needed every year for Africa to solve the issue. And yet only 7 billion is currently deployed across the various public and private sectors. So now, for African Development Bank, agriculture should no longer be like a business as usual or subsistent activities, but rather a business-oriented and commercially viable sector that creates jobs and livelihoods, providing a sustainable route out of poverty for millions of Africans. So having said that, I wanted to now highlight the key features of this Feed Africa, which is one of the priority areas of the African Development Bank. So for this Feed Africa, the main objective is to reach self-sufficiency for Africans and to enable countries to have surplus in terms of production so that they can also access to market and commercialize. So we have 18 targeted corporate commodities, and the approach, as I said, is really to scale up the value chain approach models in 5 agroecological zones in Africa. So the objectives for Feed Africa, the first one is to eliminate contribution to eliminate poverty, eradicate hunger and malnutrition is the second one. The third is to make Africa a net food exporter of agricultural product, of course, for the commodities where Africa has a comparative advantage, and to lift Africa on top of the global value chains. So briefly, this is the 5 agroecological zones we have in Africa. And for each and every one, we have the priority commodities, which can be really supported first to reach the self-sufficiency. So using maize, soybean, dairy, poultry across the Guinea Savannah, for example, and also we can use all of the commodities like we have wheat and horticulture in the North Africa, sorghum, millet, livestock across the Sahel region, rice in the all West Africa region, cassava in the humid region, and everywhere in Africa where we can have cocoa, coffee, cashew, cotton, palm oil, horticulture, fish farming. So the African Development Bank has been financing a portfolio of, actually the current portfolio is count more than 250 operations in the public sector only, and more than around 2 billion unit of account in terms of financing. So briefly in this new Feed Africa, the bank is financing more and more integrated value chain development projects, trying to address the financing gap in terms of the smart public infrastructure. So both energy, irrigation, storage facility, market, ICT. But the agriculture and agro-industry department is not only the only department working on these issues, because in the bank we have other departments also who are contributing to this agenda. We have also another area like productivity, so improving agricultural productivity, and for that the bank also is financing some flagship operations. I'll come back on that. Another area is supporting private investment development, because in the bank also we have the non-sovereign windows, which is financing the private sector entities. Another area is supporting small and medium enterprises, including youth and women. And for that, the bank actually is implementing what we call Enable Youth. Enable Youth is empowering novel agribusiness-led youth where concept of incubation, youth entrepreneurship are developed. And also there is another instrument for women, AFAWA, which is affirmative finance for women in agribusiness. Of course, the policy angle, which is very important, and the bank is more and more supporting countries to implement what we call the staple crops processing zones, which are like special economic zones or the agro-industrial corridors to put together the needed soft, hard infrastructures and the enabling environment to attract private sector with the required incentive. So in terms of financing, we can record with this strategy 7 enablers, as I mentioned, and some financing instrument, flagship or trust fund we are piloting, like for agriculture. I was mentioning the technology for African agriculture transformation, which is a vehicle for the African Development Bank to support the consortium of global international research institutions for Africa. We have also, as I mentioned, the value chain and additional enablers with, I already, I think, talked about the staple crop processing zones, but we have also another flagship, which is the post-harvest and agro-processing, where the issues like food safety and standard and post-harvest losses also are addressed.
Aminata, I'm so sorry to cut you in the interest of time. I have to be super strict now and cut you off, but we're gonna, I'm aiming on having a lot of questions around financing, because this is a very important area within the Q&A, but I do have to move on to the next speaker now, otherwise we are gonna be running out of time. And if I could please ask that all speakers just please stick to the 10 minutes, I'd be super, super, super grateful. Thank you so much, because it's a very, very important discussion, but we're going to continue the financing discussion in Q&A because I do have questions also around that, and I think it's a very important one. Moving on to our next speaker, Adrien Worte-Schilbe, who I hope I've not annihilated your last name, joining us, I believe, from Chile, where he is Senior Climate Change Economist at the Inter-American Development Bank. Adrian's work focuses on the design of effective and politically acceptable climate strategies. He develops tools to align decarbonization policies with development goals across all sectors, managing these political economic issues in the transition to net zero, and is also working on methods to build socioeconomic resilience to uncertain climate change impacts. He does this primarily through key multi-stakeholder engagement. He's a trained engineer, holds a PhD in economics, and is the author of 7 books and more than 30 academic papers on climate change and development. Adrian, I hand over to you.
Hi, Galen, thank you so much for the introduction. I need to remember to send a shorter bio next time. Someone else for one. So happy to be here. Very sorry I missed the first part. I'm actually super interested in that study that was released a moment ago. So I hope you guys recorded it, or otherwise I'll find it online. I have good news for you. I'm gonna speak much less than 10 minutes. I just wanted to say the perspective that we have from the climate change division of the IDB on this question of food, right? So as you probably can guess, our main job in the climate change division is to help the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean deal with the climate change challenge. And at the institutional level, in the IDB group, we have built something called the Vision 2025, which provides a framework to prioritize our actions in the region for sustainable recovery. And one of the 5 priorities is climate action. And so I just want to discuss very quickly today why food systems in Latin America and the Caribbean are important for climate action. I don't have slides, but I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to just share my screen to show you. This is the publication I'm talking about, and you're very welcome to actually go and download it. So I just want to say, why is food important for climate change? And in particular, of course, it's important for, climate change is important to food systems, We know that agriculture is the most vulnerable sector to climate change impact, obviously, and all of the speakers have discussed this already, so I want to focus on the other side of the coin, which is how food systems can contribute to the transition to net zero emissions, and actually why they have to contribute to that. And in the region in Latin America and the Caribbean, just below half of emissions come from the food system. And that's 2 or 3 main sources of emissions. The most important one is CO2 from deforestation, then methane from the infamous burps, and the rice production, much lower part of methane, and finally nitrous oxide from fertilizers. And that third of carbon emissions actually that comes from deforestation itself comes mainly from beef production, because in the region as globally, 80% of arable land is used for beef production, either for grazing or for growing things like soy to then feed it to the cows. And so that's why a diet shift that reduces the relative importance of beef consumption and increases the importance of other animal foods consumption and plant-based food is so important to get to net zero emission. And Latin America and the Caribbean cannot really ignore this, because it's in fact the first consumer of beef per capita in the world. There's more calories of beef consumed in Latin America and the Caribbean per person on average, averaging with all the poverty we have in the region, than in the United States, which is probably the country you think about if I talk about hamburgers. So in this study that we published with the International Labour Organization last year, we look in particular at what would be the impact of that diet shift on jobs. And we find the good news, 15 million net jobs could be created in the region by 2030. Of course, there would be winners and losers. For instance, jobs in plant-based foods could double, and 5% of jobs in livestock could be destroyed by 2030. And that trend would continue after 2030. And so we think, and we actually do, help countries to ensure what we call a just transition. And so in the case of food systems, the just transition means really 3 things. First, make sure that the potential jobs in plant-based foods do materialize, that the workers have the skills, and that those jobs enjoy good working conditions. Second, acknowledge that there's negative impacts, for instance, for the communities that depend on livestock, and compensate those negative impacts with things like social protection, reskilling, investing in other kind of jobs in the same communities and things like that. And third, make sure that everybody affected by climate policies and the transition to net zero has a voice in the process of the design of the climate policy. So make sure in particular that farmers and indigenous people that sometimes are marginalized and that don't get to participate in the policy design process in our countries do have a voice. I guess that's really the main messages about the just transition. Just want to emphasize, of course, adapting jobs to the changing climate is also important. For instance, we know that heat stress alone in the region by 2030 could destroy the equivalent of more than 2 million jobs, just because it's when it's too hot to work outside, people have a lower productivity or just stop working altogether. Of course, agriculture is the main affected sector. Construction is the second one. And adapting to that can sometimes be very simple. Again, if you give a voice to affected communities and workers, they can organize with managers the conditions of work that sometimes is enough to adapt. For instance, deciding that there's a few hours in the day where it's too hot where they don't work, or making sure they have access to water or access to shade or access to equipment that reduce the exposure. So in this case, it can be something as simple as a hat. I'm not saying these simple things are going to solve entirely the problem. I'm saying this perspective of saying if we give a voice to the affected communities and we let everybody co-construct the policies, sometimes it's very simple what adaptation to climate change means. I guess that's the points I wanted to make today, and thank again very much for the invitation.
Oh, thank you very much, Adrian. And I think it's very important. I think there are things that on their own don't necessarily make a difference. But going back to simple aspects, at the end of the day, I think that what part of my frustrations with the sustainability sphere at large, and I don't necessarily work only specifically with food waste, is that it's almost like people trying to reinvent the wheel all the time.
Exactly.
And a lot of the solutions are simple, number one. It's just about the implementation of them that are either correct or not correct. But if we badly implement something and it doesn't work, we can't say, well, that solution is not right. It's just we've badly implemented it, so we should revisit it. And absolutely, I think, we can't, it's poor management, and it's very actually arrogant if we don't listen to the people who are most affected on the ground, those indigenous communities, about what they need, how they're impacted, how they need to be supported, how they can be brought out of their situations and to flourish. It's very arrogant just to impose solutions on them according to us who don't live their lives. So I think those are really pertinent points, and I will be asking you for all of you for key takeaways. I know, Adrian, you've given some important ones in your talk, but other things that we can actually actionably simply do in order to help tackle this problem. Right, last but certainly not least, I have the pleasure of introducing Roddy McLean, who is Director of Agriculture at NatWest. Roddy's responsibilities include helping ensure the bank's policy towards agriculture continues to be fit for purpose. I imagine that's not an easy thing to do. And supporting the bank's relationship managers remain informed on current farming issues, providing them with advice on more complex agricultural lending propositions. In addition to representing NatWest on public platforms, Roddy supports a number of initiatives to upskill the next generation of farmers. He joined NatWest after working for 21 years as an agricultural consultant with the Scottish Agricultural College. And prior to this, Roddy gained practical experience on a number of farms around the UK. He still gets his hands dirty by helping out, or as he likes to joke, maybe hindering his son, who manages a farm locally. Roddy, I hand over to you.
Good afternoon and hello, everybody. As said, I'm Director of Agriculture for NatWest, which has around a 25% lending market share to UK farmers. I'm going to spend, and literally it is a few minutes, highlighting 5 areas of work we're undertaking to help our farmers on their climate and sustainability journey. We've entered into a partnership with the Sustainable Food Trust to further develop and refine their global farm metric tool that will enable farmers to measure their environmental and societal impact and give them actionable insights. The framework assesses the farmer, his business, his land assets against a number of activities, including broadly, and these are broad categories: productivity, soil, water, energy and resource use, air and climate, and that captures emissions, nutrient management, livestock management, plant and crop health, biodiversity, social and human capital. Earlier this year, we carried out a small trial with some of our customers and received a very positive response to the tool, albeit that it was quite cumbersome and it required a lot of data inputting because it was based on spreadsheets. And that's part of what we're doing, is to help them take it on to a much more sophisticated tool. And early into next year, probably in the first couple of months, we're going to run another pilot with the SFT for around 100 of our farming customers here in the UK. So if you know of any farmer in the UK that would be interested, please let me know. And I think key to this is that despite us partnering Sustainable Food Trust, we as a bank are not taking any IP or any other rights over the tool. As it's developed, it's going to be available to all and sundry to use with no restrictions, to help every farming business in the UK. And certainly SFT would like to see this, as the name suggests, going globally. Second point I want to make is just the time and effort and investment we're making in our managers and they're making in themselves. That's our frontline managers that are working day in, day out with our agricultural customers. Over the last year, they've been undertaking and completed a number of training modules to ensure that they understand and appreciate the impacts of climate change and the opportunities that that may bring for businesses. This has been delivered through a number of partners, notably Edinburgh University, who delivered some scene-setting training and who's also collaborated with others in delivering some specific agricultural insights and some case studies that shows what some businesses that are at the forefront and leading edge are already doing to help mitigate the challenge to their business and society in general. The training is empowering our managers to have meaningful discussions with clients around their own transition journey and suggest areas that if they haven't thought of, that they might like to consider taking action around. And so much so, it compelled one of our customers to drop us a little note. They're livestock farmers, a 90-year-old grandfather, the farmer in his mid-50s and his 20-year-old son. So they have a blend of experience and enthusiasm to embrace change. And they are embracing reaching net zero by 2040. And their email to us said, our excellent relationship manager was excited to inform me that he was accredited following passing a climate change awareness program running by the Edinburgh Business School. And I have to say that my son and I were impressed that our bank manager could conduct discussions around various sustainable issues which are to the forefront of our minds. He goes on to say that I didn't personally expect anybody from a local NatWest talking in depth on various topics and being able to signpost and raise awareness. I have to say from other farmers I speak to that NatWest appears to be well placed in this respect. So that was pleasing for us to get our efforts recognised, and it's something we're going to continue to grow on as the months and years carry on and greater understanding and acceptance builds and more knowledge comes to the fore. We're also working on and will be launching in the early part of next year a green use of proceeds loan that will be driven by the Loan Market Association Green Loans Principles, and it will deliver a pricing benefit to those that qualify for the loan. In broad terms, we're looking at investments on farm that will enhance biodiversity and natural capital. In terms of machinery, investment in machinery that will reduce emissions. We will look to help people with forest and woodland plantings. Any energy efficient measures that businesses take, whether it be improving refrigeration plants in their cold stores, the cooling system for their dairies, etc. Better metering and management of greenhouses, etc. And anything that ties in with precision agriculture. We'll also be looking at waste management, so improving slurry stores and the equipment to spread that slurry on the land to deliver best effect. Those are just a few examples. We've got a list of about 10 broad categories that we're further refining for the elements within that I say will qualify for this new loan product. And Intelligent Growth Solutions, whom I believe you heard from earlier, we are working with them to identify a customer where we can refine a funding package for vertical farm facilities and the associated kit using traditional and asset type finance. So that's very much live, and I say we think we know we can do it, but it's just understanding the best balance and what works best for the ultimate customer. And finally, at COP26 here in Glasgow, there was the announcement of the methane pledge to cut emissions by 30% by 2030. While other sectors are potentially more in the firing line, oil and gas extraction, processing and distribution accounting for 23%, coal mining 12%, and waste accounting for a further 20% of emissions, we recognise that farming will need to play its part. And to this end, we're looking to commission a guide to distribute to our livestock farmers here in Britain from recognised and respected industry experts, outlining the top 6 or 10 actions that they can take to improve their productivity and profitability and hence lower their emissions, delivering a win-win situation to all. We're doing it as that because we think our customers potentially are getting a bit punch drunk, to use that phrase, around climate, and are perhaps waiting to see where government policy goes. But if we address productivity and profitability, that will grab their attention and be something that they're able to act upon and action, regardless of what happens with policy. And I hope in this brief outline that you can see that we are playing our part in helping our customers to transition to a more sustainable and resilient future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roddy, and thank you to all our speakers. And I think what you speak to, Roddy, I'm actually sitting in Geneva, and I attended a Building Bridges, which is a sustainable finance summit here earlier last week. And what you touched upon is discussions that I was having about, the ability to take action regardless of where policy is at, if you really want to make a difference. And policy is very, very important, and agriculture is immensely important because it's one of the areas that touches upon, I don't need to tell you that you're the expert, I'm not the agriculturist, but that touches upon the most of the SDGs and the targets. And so how that is laid out is really, really important as well, because it's infrastructural as well as anything else. But there are things that people can do regardless of the policy not yet being there. I'm going to start off the questions. Thank you for the questions that have been coming in. I do want to guide the conversation eventually to my kind of area of expertise, which is more about finance. But before that, I'll take a couple of quick questions, which will be more for Fiona regarding the work of the EIT. One very quick question: is the UK still covered by the EIT now that it's ex-EU? And more importantly, I have that issue. I'm a Brit, nice Navy passport, but that's about it. How disposed is the EIT towards innovative proposals for African communities by any chance? I think you guys
so the kind of well. The two are sort of linked. The short answer is that UK companies should still be eligible for support from EIT food. It's complicated. It's complicated, of course, by Brexit. There was a commitment from the UK government that they would continue to allow, they would basically put money into Horizon funding through becoming an associate country. European Horizons funding programs are actually accessible to countries that are out with the European Union, hence, for instance, Iceland being a partner and Israel, etc., Switzerland, but they do need to make a financial contribution. And the UK research community had lobbied very hard for the UK to be part of that. However, I believe that we're still waiting on a signature for the paperwork to say that UK will definitely be involved. So it is not as good a situation as we would like. There are still options to be involved as a third country. Basically, any country can be part of European Horizon projects, but they couldn't lead it. So it is very tricky at the moment. We hope it's going to be resolved. What I would say at the moment is that actually just look to see the sort of projects that EIT Food is involved in, and look at who the partners are and the key players are, because you may well find that there are research institutes or businesses across Europe where you feel that they could be of use because they're in the same area. And if that's the case, I would reach out to EIT Food, look for connections, because funding is hugely important, but actually the ability to collaborate and have shared interests in research can be equally useful. So we're hoping it will be resolved, but it's very contentious at the moment. In terms of Africa, I think it kind of almost the same applies, that some of the big challenges, the big global challenges really. So initiatives around sustainability in different parts of Europe could equally apply for Africa as well. There's a lot around aquaculture, for instance. So it may well be that they find like-minded people and projects that may actually be partly run in Africa. But again, it's not terribly straightforward, but it's worth looking to see what we're doing.
Perfect. So do take a look on the EIT website, which is very, very rich of a lot of
the
EIT.
I would also say that sometimes the EIT website is incredibly complicated, so you need to spend a bit of time delving in. And if you're really stuck, just drop me an email and I see if I can find where to look at least.
Wonderful. We still have 10 minutes for questions. And I'd like to direct actually and continue the discussion that Aminata, that I had to cut off, I'm sorry, but regarding funding. So for me, my background, being in finance, much of what also, what Aminata began to speak about and what Andrew Lloyd in the previous session spoke of resonates with a lot of the discussions that I have. And funding, which again, Fiona, you just touched on, is really important to the transition. In sustainability circles, we speak a lot about the importance of both private and public funds coming together, because for practical reasons, we do need both to make up the maths. I also know that from certain, if we talk about more kind of startups, there are a couple of Africa-based startups that I've been engaged with that find, for example, funding. They don't have access, obviously, to capital markets, the world that I hail from in banking. They don't have access in getting grants and other such are not always easy. VC funding, for example, because of lack of immediate ROI, financial ROI is a tough sphere to engage with in order to help further these important projects. Fiona, you mentioned the EIT and other supranationals, Africa Development Bank. I'd like the question actually to go to Aminata. I'd like you to elaborate about what the African Development Bank is doing in terms of funding and helping these projects. And then I'll open up maybe to the others just to kind of understand better, who are the key funders of the food sustainability transition that small initiatives can turn to. Aminata, perhaps if you could go first.
Yeah, so in terms of funding, African Development Bank is a bank. So one of its objective is to finance the development of Africa. And agriculture is a priority area. Now, African Development Bank has several windows. One dedicated for public sector. So public investment in the states, the countries are the beneficiaries of that window. And so the bank will invest only or will finance if the countries themselves, they have in their own development strategies, agriculture has a priority because there is a competition among sectors. Now, the good news is that in most of the countries in their development agenda, agriculture and globally the diversification of the economies through so agriculture is one of their priorities. So the countries can benefit from this window to access to concessionary loans or grants. And the second window is dedicated to private sector. And the private sector, the large private sector, can access through ADB finance. And most of the case for the priority areas of Africa, and agriculture is among those priorities. And rural development also is one of those priorities. So Africa is financing using the traditional windows, but we have several trust funds to finance knowledge development also, or to find capacity building in our countries. Now, in terms of climate change, because I did not focus, because maybe there is another specific department in the African Development Bank dealing specifically with climate change, and this department is not the agriculture department. So this shows that the importance of climate change in African Development Bank. And actually, following this, the summit on climate change, the African government has announced a facility on climate adaptation. So this, going forward, the facility will be one of the main vehicles the bank will use to invest in African countries in terms of adaptation. So maybe this is what I wanted to say. We are beginning as agriculture department. We have one flagship we are calling smart climate smart agriculture, just to help countries to have in their strategies to mainstream smart technology, smart infrastructures, and also to maybe work together in the Sahel region or in the Horn of Africa, where we have important multinational operations. The bank is also pushing countries to realize. Thank you.
Thank you, Aminata. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to put this question that's come through to you. We've spoken obviously a lot about Africa. Adrien, you're in Latin America, which is also a very, very important area. Aminata, you just brought up the important word of adaptation, because we can only mitigate to a certain extent, and the rest is going to have to adapt, and so to minimize the effects of climate crisis. What initiatives, and I'll open this up to all of you, what initiatives have you seen that are effective in different countries and that other countries can learn from? What kind of case study, what kind of poster child can you bring to the fore and that others can, for example, learn from?
Maybe I can start with a few examples. So unfortunately, I work in the climate change division, and at the IDB, we have a natural resource and agriculture division that would be in the forefront, and they would know detailed example better, but I can still give you like a flavor of the kind of things we do, right? So of course, for adaptation, there's something very basic, which is investments in infrastructure. So the IDB, for instance, will typically give loans to governments for things like irrigation infrastructure or reservoirs to, I don't know how to pronounce it, like dams to store water for, for irrigation. Connecting farmers and markets with transport infrastructure is also actually a way to adapt to the impacts of climate change in terms of natural disasters and floods, for instance. Also very important that we do what we call technical cooperation, where is financial instruments where we basically give money. It's much less, it's not hundreds of millions, it can be like more like hundreds of thousands, to do pilot projects. For instance, I've learned of a pilot project we did, I think it was in Colombia, where we go to the communities and we put them in contact with experts that teach them about changing their practices, such as planting trees in the same land they use for coffee or cattle growing, are the two cliche examples, so that the trees provide shade. And so actually you have a win-win strategy where you store carbon, so it's contributing to the transition to net zero, but also adapts to a higher temperature at the same time. And then I think the most transformational kind of instruments that we have is scaling this up, either by lending money to the government, for instance, to the forestry or agriculture agency that would use the money to pay thousands of farmers for the provision of ecosystem services, in particular in the form of growing trees on the land. And then the one thing I think is most transformational is what we call the policy-based loans, where we actually support the governments changing the regulations and institutions. So it's more abstract, more upstream, but I think more transformational. For instance, in Costa Rica, we're helping them change the way they finance actually with taxes, their own payment for ecosystem services. So you can help the government change the rules and regulation and move from farmers receiving, I don't know, a few dozens of dollars per ton of CO2 sequestered to double. I don't know the actual numbers. But what my point is, by changing the regulations, you can have an impact on all of the country. And that's the, I think, most powerful kind of instrument that we have from development banks.
Wonderful, and I hope those loans are got key performance indicators. Because for me, as an ex-banker, green bonds I don't like because of the fact that they are actually purported greenwash because they don't have those performance indicators linked to them. We are just about out of time. I would like first of all, I'd like to thank all of our speakers. I'd like to thank Ife and the Intelli Digest team as well for having us all here, because this is a really, really important topic, food sustainability. Just to contextualize to people, the amount of food that we waste, and these are UN figures from the Food and Agricultural Organization, for anybody who's watching who might not be familiar with this topic, the amount of loss or waste because of food waste is about $2.6 trillion every year, which is more than enough to feed all the 815 million hungry people in the world 4 times over. So that, if that does not a startling statistic, I'm not sure what is. Quick key takeaway from everybody. I'm going to start off by saying reach out to our speakers, collaborate, connect with those who may be able to work further with all these amazing people that we've heard from today, because these challenges require all hands on deck. Quick key takeaway, less than 30 seconds from each one of you on something that's simple, low cost, that everybody can actually individually do to make a change. Anyone start? Fiona.
Oh, that is a really tricky challenge, something you can do yourself. Dig out some recipes and use waste food in your fridge. That's something I'm really guilty of myself. Yeah.
Important one.
Lots of tips on EIT. We're about educating consumers as well. So take a look at that.
Important. I'm going to go around anti-clockwise. Aminata.
Yeah, in terms of food loss, as I mentioned, because this is the main concern in Africa, I think what we need to do is to invest more in value addition and in capacity building, because most of the case, the problem is a gap in infrastructure, but also gap in terms of applying the correct norms, and also, of course, climate change also, which is part of the problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Roddy, when you work with Tesco, for example, big UK supermarket, but any supermarket, what can individuals do to make a difference? That's an easy one.
Work together with them to deliver a bigger bang for our collective buck. But I say, at individual farm level, I'm challenging our customers to honestly stand back from their business and challenge them to have they got the right attention to detail to deliver improved productivity. And I can be quite critical of them, and have been of my son and what he is doing, and just looking for cumulative marginal gains. So it's not accepting the status quo, looking to drive forward the business, and that will, by its inherent nature, deliver for the climate.
Perfect. And last but not least, Adrien.
Yeah, for policymakers who are my usual audience, don't forget the importance of involving consumers and producers of food in the design of climate policies, but also involve academia and scientists, who are the ones who are going to tell you that shifting diets away from beef is a key thing you cannot ignore for a sustainable food future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll hand back over to Ife and the Intelli Digest team. Thank you for having us all here.
Well, thank you so much, Gillian, Roddy, Aminata, Adrian, and Fiona for the amazing conversation through this second panel session. It's been quite informative and insightful to learn about everything that we are doing. And I think that really opens up opportunity for us to, and everyone, who has joined us today, to understand what the problem is. The staggering statistics that you mentioned, Gillian, is something that more people need to get away and understand that we are, as consumers, as producers across the food system, we have got a part to play to ensure that we can evolve this sustainable food system. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're gonna play some video, which we did play during the break session. So if you just want to relax have your coffee and watch that. That would be great. We also invite you to part of the Plan to Save campaign. And we've launched AgriFood Techpreneur project today during the first session. And we really want to work with everyone of you to ensure that we can get our young people to be involved in agri-food system, to innovate and support them through that innovation process. So thank you for joining us today, and looking forward to working together to evolve a sustainable food system.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.